10th of June in the year 1993. Michael Peterson stows his last backpack in his trunk. 8 days later, 3 friends will disappear from the face of the earth without a trace. 14 years later, human remains with a bullet hole in the back of the head are discovered in an abandoned cave. Michael Peterson put the last North Face backpack in the trunk of his dark green 1,989-year-old Jeep Cherokee in the early morning hours of June 10th, 1993, the clock on the dashboard showing 7 hours and 30 minutes. "We're going to see the real America, boys, not the one on NBC TV," he told his friends, David Cooper and Thomas Mitchell, who were finishing the last of their preparations in the backyard of Michael's Seattle home. The 3 21-year-old University of Washington graduates were planning a 2-week trip across the American Southwest to celebrate graduation and the beginning of real life. The sky over Seattle that morning was unusually clear, without the haze characteristic of the region. The thermometer on the veranda of the Peterson house read 62 degrees Fahrenheit. John Peterson, Michael's father, stepped out into the yard with a thermos filled with freshly brewed coffee. "It'll come in handy on the road," he said, handing the thermos to his son. A copy of the weather forecast for the day survived in the Seattle Police Department's archives. Predominantly sunny, no precipitation, perfect conditions for the start of a long trip. Thomas, the most organized of the 3, laid out on the kitchen table the detailed itinerary he'd printed on his father's Canon printer. Seattle to Portland, to San Francisco, to Los Angeles, to Grand Canyon, to Albuquerque, to Denver, and back to Seattle. "Look, I even marked all the Motel 6 motels along the way. They're the cheapest," Thomas explained, pointing to the red dots on the map. Michael shrugged. "We agreed to camp out under the stars most of the time." "There should always be a plan B," Thomas replied, folding the map neatly and placing it in a waterproof Ziploc case. The Petersons' neighbor, 78-year-old Martha Clark, watched the young men gather from her porch. Later, in an interview for the local Seattle Times, she would say, "Those boys were so lively, so full of plans. Thomas even came up to me this morning and said he was bringing me a refrigerator magnet from the Grand Canyon. I have a whole collection of magnets, you know." David, an aspiring photographer, was checking out his new Pentax K1000 camera, bought especially for this trip, and joked, "Someday these pictures will be worth millions. My mom always said I'd be famous." He loaded 3 Kodak tapes, carefully placing them in a special protective case. 84 frames. "Do you seriously think that's enough for 2 weeks?" Michael asked, watching his friend. "I have 6 more tapes in the side pocket of my backpack. I don't want to miss a moment," replied David, checking the camera shutter for the 100th time. According to entries in Thomas's diary found in his room after his disappearance, the trip had been planned for over 3 months. March 2nd, Michael suggested the idea for the trip. David immediately agreed. Beginning budget and itinerary, read the first entry pertaining to the future trip. The last entry, dated June 9th, contained a list of necessary medications. Bayer aspirin, Dramamine for motion sickness, off, insect repellent, Coppertone sunscreen, factor 30. On a shelf in David's room remained an unread Stephen King novel, The Tommyknockers, with a bookmark on page 258. His mother, Judith Cooper, would write in her memoirs, "He said he would finish it on the road when it was his turn to sit in the back seat." The book remained unread. Michael's mother, Elizabeth Peterson, hugged her son one last time and handed him a bag of homemade cookies. She later recalled, "I felt strangely anxious, but wrote it off as just normal motherly excitement. If only I had known it was the last time I would see my boy. At 8 hours and 14 minutes, Michael received a final call on his Motorola pager. It was his girlfriend, Christina Ross, who couldn't make it to see him off because of a summer part-time job at a Starbucks coffee shop. He called her back from our home phone, Elizabeth Peterson told investigators. Their conversation lasted no more than 5 minutes. The last thing I heard Michael say was, "I love you too. I'll see you in 2 weeks." The day before he left, Thomas received an official letter of acceptance to Columbia Law School. During the trip, he planned to mull over whether to accept the offer or stay in Seattle. His father, history professor Richard Mitchell, showed investigators a copy of the letter. He wanted to use this trip to clear his mind about the future. Sometimes you have to distance yourself from your familiar surroundings to realize what you really want. Michael Peterson, the most impulsive of the three, had already secured an internship at an advertising agency that was to begin 3 days after their supposed return. In his room, investigators found a letter he had started, titled, "Why I Want to Work in the Creative Industry." The last sentence broke off halfway through. "I believe my ideas can change the way people perceive." At 8 hours and 45 minutes, the Jeep Cherokee pulled out of the Petersons' backyard. A neighbor boy, 12-year-old Brian Wilson, riding a Schwinn bicycle, waved at them. They had the radio on full volume. Some rock song was playing. All 3 of them were smiling and seemed very happy, he later recalled. The last stop before leaving town was a Texaco gas station at the intersection of Pine Street and 12th Avenue. A surveillance camera recorded Michael filling up the car while Thomas and David bought bottles of Evian mineral water and Snickers bars from the store. This footage, dated 8 hours and 52 minutes on the morning of June 10th, 1993, would be the last documentation of their presence in Seattle. Neither of them suspected that the journey ahead would not end with their return home, but would be the beginning of one of America's most mysterious crime stories of the 90s. The 18th of June in the year 1993. The temperature in Arizona reaches 104 degrees Fahrenheit. 72 hours later, the car of the 3 friends will be found empty, but the young men themselves will never be found. The last reliable contact with the 3 friends occurred at 15 hours and 20 minutes on June 18th, 1993, when they stopped at a Shell gas station in the town of Flagstaff, Arizona, about 80 miles from the Grand Canyon. They seemed excited, joked around a lot, bought a few bottles of Coca-Cola and a pack of Doritos chips. Nothing unusual for tourists heading into the canyon, recalled Jack Harris, who worked at the gas station that day. A surveillance camera captured Michael paying for gas, while David photographed the antique gas station sign with his Pentax camera. According to cash register records preserved in the investigative archives, the payment was made at 15 hours and 23 minutes with a Visa credit card in the name of Michael Peterson. The thermometer on the front of the gas station showed 104 degrees Fahrenheit. "I also warned them to take more water. Dehydration sets in very quickly in this heat," Harris added in a deposition given 3 weeks later. The camera footage shows that the young men followed the advice and bought an additional 6-liter bottles of Aquafina water, which they loaded into the trunk of the car. 5 hours later, at 20 hours and 37 minutes, Thomas Mitchell's cell phone registered one last outgoing call, a short one lasting 34 seconds, to his parents. "He was very brief," recalled Margaret Mitchell, Thomas's mother. "He said they were approaching the Grand Canyon and were going to stop at the observation deck to see the sunset." The connection was bad, but I could clearly hear the excitement in his voice. According to weather reports, the sun set at 19 hours and 43 minutes that day. The last cell phone signal from all three friends was picked up by an AT&T cell tower 4 miles from the south rim of the Grand Canyon at 21 hours and 12 minutes. After that, total silence. 3 days later, on June 21st, Grand Canyon Park Ranger Sarah Johnson found an empty Jeep Cherokee parked at the Lipan Point Lookout, with the doors unlocked and the keys in the ignition. Inside the vehicle were all of their belongings: 3 backpacks with a change of clothes, a Columbia tent, sleeping bags, maps, and even Thomas Mitchell's wallet with $300 bills, the initial Arizona State Police report stated. In a detailed report of the scene examination, Detective Paul Ramirez noted, "The vehicle was parked neatly within the marked parking zone. No signs of struggle or violence were observed. The tire tracks are consistent with standard parking maneuvering." The strangeness of the situation was emphasized by many small details. On the dashboard of the car was a map of Grand Canyon National Park, with the route marked with a red marker. A bottle of Aquafina water was open and standing in the driver's seat cup holder, almost full. In the trunk were not only travel gear, but also souvenirs acquired during the trip: a refrigerator magnet from Los Angeles, a T-shirt with an image of the Golden Gate Bridge, and 3 postcards with views of San Francisco, already signed but unsent. David's Pentax camera was in a special case in the back seat. What is particularly odd, Sarah Johnson noted in her report, is that the camera contained film that was about half used. It is hard to imagine that an amateur photographer would voluntarily leave his camera behind, especially in a place as scenic as the Grand Canyon. A K9 service dog named Rex was brought to the scene of the vehicle discovery at 16 o'clock that afternoon. The dog's guide, Officer Mike Donovan, recorded, "Rex confidently picked up the trail from the vehicle to the edge of the observation deck, but then lost it about 30 yards from the fence. This is unusual. The odor couldn't just disappear." The search operation involving helicopters, K9 technicians, and more than 100 volunteers lasted 42 days, but found no trace of the missing students. Coconino County Sheriff Alan Brett, in an interview with the Arizona Daily Sun, a local newspaper, on June 25th, stated, "We combed a 5-mile radius of the vehicle. We used thermal imaging cameras, drones, special cameras. It's like the earth opened up and swallowed them up." National Weather Service meteorologist James Kowalski noted, "On the night of June 18th through 19th, the Grand Canyon area was cloudless with temperatures not dropping below 75 degrees. No storms, floods, or other abnormal natural phenomena were observed. A check of the missing person's bank accounts and credit cards revealed no transactions after June 18th. Cell phones were not registered online. No airplane or bus tickets were purchased in their names. Social Security was not used." On July 7th, an extended search of the canyon revealed a Boston Red Sox baseball cap belonging to Michael Peterson, 3 miles from the lookout, at the bottom of a small crevice. The condition of the baseball cap indicated that it had been there for several days, exposed to the elements, Rick Martinez reported in the search team's report. But it was the only personal item found outside the vehicle. The search was officially scaled back on July 15th and called off on August 2nd due to lack of new evidence and dwindling resources. Sheriff Brett stated at a press conference, "We will continue to investigate, but the active phase of the search is over. We encourage hikers and rangers to remain vigilant and report any potential clues." An official police report dated September 2nd 1993 stated, "It is highly likely the young men were victims of a hiking accident, possibly falling into one of the many canyons or crevasses." Forensic scientist John Walker, who signed the report, reasoned, "The lack of signs of struggle, the safety of valuables, and the position of the vehicle indicate that the young men voluntarily left the vehicle, probably for a short walk during which the accident occurred." A grim statistic was cited in the report by park safety specialist Eric Morrison. An average of 12 people go missing or die in the Grand Canyon each year. Most cases are related to underestimating the dangers of the landscape, especially at sunset when lighting can distort perception of depth and distance. But the families of the missing have vehemently rejected this version. Robert Cooper, David's father, rejected it from the start. "My son was an experienced hiker. He would never take his friends to a dangerous place without preparation, and they wouldn't leave all their belongings in the car. Something else happened here, something the police are unwilling or unable to investigate." Elizabeth Peterson, Michael's mother, at a meeting with reporters on September 25th, showed the last postcard received from her son on June 17th. He writes that they plan to stay at the Best Western Motel at the south entrance to the park, but their names are not in the registration book. They never made it there. Something happened on the way. Private investigator Ray Martinez, hired by the families in October 1993, pointed out a disturbing fact. Within a 100-mile radius of the disappearance site, 4 other people have gone missing in the last 5 years, all tourists, and none of these cases have been solved. It's a statistical outlier that should have gotten the attention of federal agencies. But the official story remained unchanged. 3 young men joined the sad statistics of disappearances written off as wilderness accidents. Their names were added to a memorial book of park visitors who died under unclear circumstances. The story gradually disappeared from the news headlines, leaving behind only unanswered questions. August 23, 2007, 14 years after the disappearance. One hiker steps off the beaten path. What he discovers in the next 30 minutes will forever change the perception of the case of the 3 missing students and call into question all previous investigative leads. On August 23, 2007, 14 years after the disappearance, experienced hiker Marcus Reynolds, while exploring a little-visited area of the national park about 2 miles from Lipan Point Lookout, discovered a narrow entrance to a cave system partially hidden behind a rock ledge. "I noticed something shiny inside. It turned out to be the metal buttons on a Levi's jacket, and when I shined my flashlight, I saw bones," Reynolds testified at a subsequent trial. The 43-year-old Denver geologist said the temperature that day reached 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and he was looking for a shady place to rest when he noticed an unusual hole in a rocky slope. An entry in the park's visitor log confirms that Reynolds logged his route at 9 hours and 12 minutes in the morning, indicating that he planned to explore little-known formations in the northeast quadrant. According to the GPS coordinates recorded by his Samsung smartphone, the discovery occurred at 14 hours and 37 minutes, at a point with coordinates 36 degrees 52 minutes north latitude, 111 degrees 53 minutes west longitude. The cave entrance was so narrow that an adult could only squeeze through sideways, explained karst specialist Alan Peterson, who was later involved in the investigation. This feature, combined with a natural screen of protruding rock and xerophilous vegetation, made the entrance virtually invisible to normal search operations. The interior of the cave, according to the crime scene inspection report, was a system of 3 connected chambers, totaling about 56 square meters. The first chamber, the smallest, was where the human remains were found, lying in anatomical order, partially covered by a decayed Levi's denim jacket. As soon as I realized what I had found, I immediately backed out and called the Rangers, Reynolds continued in his statement. According to the dispatch log entry, his call came in at 15 hours and 1 minute. The first official team of 3 Rangers, led by Thomas Hines, arrived at the discovery site at 16 hours and 20 minutes. Photographs of the scene, obtained by a special Matterport scan and subsequently provided to the court, show a narrow cave with reddish walls covered in limescale. A flashlight beam picks out skeletonized remains from the darkness, with items of clothing and personal belongings lying nearby. A forensic examination by Dr. Ellen Morrow of the FBI's Quantico Crime Lab determined that the remains belonged to David Cooper and bore obvious signs of violent death. There were handcuff marks on the wrists and an entry wound in the back of the skull from a .38 caliber bullet characteristic of an execution, read the official forensic report, dated September 3, 2007. Forensic scientist John Rivera, who participated in the examination, noted, "The nature of the bone damage indicates that the shot was fired at close range, probably less than 10 centimeters. This type of wound is often observed in executions when the shooter controls the position of the victim." Expert anthropologist Sarah Livingston, who analyzed the remains, stated in her report, "The pattern of soft tissue degradation and the condition of the skeleton are consistent with an approximate 14-year age of death, which is consistent with the date of disappearance. The dry climate of the cave favored partial natural mummification of some tissues, which aided in identification and analysis. Dental records obtained from Washington University Hospital, where David Cooper was treated in 1992, provided a 99 and 9/10% probability of confirming the identity of the deceased. Additional DNA testing conducted with samples provided by the parents yielded a 100% match. David's personal belongings were also found in the cave: a leather bracelet engraved with the initials DC, a broken Pentax camera, and several coins arranged in a strange geometric pattern that was later found to have ritual significance for the killer. An examination of the contents of the camera by Kodak lab experts revealed that the film had been exposed, probably intentionally. Particularly disturbing was the discovery of one intact photograph on Polaroid 600 Polaroid paper, falling face down next to the remains, FBI Special Agent Michael Connor noted in his report. The photograph captured the 3 friends in front of a Jeep Cherokee at the time of their stop at the Shell gas station, referenced in the case file. The picture was taken from across the street, apparently without their knowledge. Criminalist Lawrence Schaefer, who specializes in behavioral analysis, commented, "The presence of such a photograph indicates that the perpetrator probably followed the victims for some time prior to the attack. This is typical of an organized predator who carefully selects targets and plans the crime." What particularly shocked the investigators was that deep inside the cave, they found evidence of long-term human habitation: a makeshift bed made of twigs, a collection of National Geographic magazines dating back to the early 90s, and a strange memory wall with photos of various tourists taken surreptitiously from a great distance. Some of the magazines were dated July 1993, meaning they appeared here well after the students disappeared, forensic scientist Emily Donovan noted in the report. The memory wall was of particular importance to the investigation. 27 photographs, secured to the rock face with Scotch tape, depicted various people in Grand Canyon National Park. All of the photographs were taken surreptitiously. The subjects were unaware of the surveillance, the report stated. The back of some of the photos contained dates and strange symbols, the meaning of which has yet to be determined. Experts from the FBI's Office of Behavioral Analysis noted that there were characteristic signs of an organized serial offender's lair. The perpetrator created a space where he could control the environment and relive his fantasies, explained Dr. James Finch, a forensic psychologist. The presence of a memory wall indicates trophy behavior, typical of a certain subtype of serial killers who collect their victims through images and personal items. This was not a spontaneous killing, but the work of an individual who methodically stalked his victims and may have observed them long before the attack, said FBI agent Robert Caldwell at a press briefing on September 13, 2007. The location of the cave, the manner in which the body was concealed, and the organization of the space indicate a high level of planning and knowledge of the area. The presence of the lair also explained why search dogs lost the trail in 1993. The perpetrator likely used scent trail concealment techniques, suggested canine specialist Brian Hopkins in his analysis. Given the items found in the cave, we can assume he had a basic knowledge of search team techniques. At a press conference held on September 14, 2007, FBI Regional Director Sandra Thompson stated, "We are dealing with a whole new scenario in this case. What was once considered a tragic accident is now one of the most disturbing unsolved murders in the history of this region." David Cooper's parents, who attended the press conference, issued a brief statement. "For 14 years we lived in the dark. Now we know the truth, but that brings no relief. We demand justice not only for our son, but also for his friends, who we are sure were also victims of this monster." The case was officially reclassified from disappearance under unclear circumstances to murder, and a special investigative team of 12 agents, codenamed Operation Echo Canyon, was created. The 4th of October in the year 2007. A small sheriff's office on the outskirts of a tourist town. A woman in a worn denim jacket takes a long time to collect her thoughts before uttering a name that will completely change the course of the investigation. In the next 18 days, FBI agents will discover the house hiding the collection of death. A breakthrough in the investigation occurred on October 4, 2007, when former park ranger Janet Wilkins came to the Coconino County Sheriff's Office with information about her former colleague. "Raymond Carver was always a concern to me. He was overly interested in young campers, especially groups of male friends, and often took shifts at the most remote posts, even when offered a more convenient schedule," she told Detective Marcus Rodriguez. Security camera footage from the interview room recorded that the conversation began at 14 hours and 17 minutes and lasted 2 hours and 43 minutes. The recording shows Wilkins pausing periodically, as if immersed in painful memories. Detective Rodriguez, 42 years old, a 15-year veteran of the Major Crimes Unit, later recalled, "When she mentioned that Carver often returned from patrols with souvenirs allegedly found on the trails, a chill ran down my spine. That detail kept me on my toes." In his official report filed that same evening with Chief of Investigations David Miller, Rodriguez noted, "The informant provides specific behavioral markers that match the profile compiled by the FBI's behavioral unit for this case." Carver, 48 years old, worked as a caretaker at the Grand Canyon from 1999 to 1996, after which he abruptly quit and moved to an isolated house 15 miles from the park. A photograph from a Park Service personnel file shows a thin man with prematurely graying hair and a piercing look in his blue eyes. Colleagues described him as reserved but exceptionally knowledgeable about the area. We should have noticed the warning signs earlier. He kept detailed records of visitors beyond his job description, and I once saw him pick up a wallet forgotten on the observation deck, but not turn it in to lost and found, Wilkins added in her testimony. A transcript of the interview captures the tremor in her voice. He often said that tourists were invaders desecrating a sacred place. He used that very word, desecrators. Meteorological records for the 4th of October, 2007, noted an unusually hot day for fall, 91 degrees Fahrenheit and low humidity. The air conditioning system in the sheriff's office was malfunctioning, creating a stuffy, tense atmosphere in the interrogation room that heightened the drama of the moment. Within 48 hours of receiving Wilkins's information, a special task force of FBI agents, state police officers, and the local sheriff's office was formed. Agent James Burke of the FBI's Phoenix office led the investigation, codenamed Operation Pilgrim. A thorough background check on Carver revealed gaps in his past and his discharge from the U.S. Army in 1987 for unspecified reasons. His military records contain redactions and deletions typical of disciplinary incidents of a serious nature, noted Special Agent Clara Jenkins's October 7th analytical report. Archival records from Mono County, California, from where Carver moved to Arizona, contain 2 allegations of disturbed behavior, from neighbors reporting nighttime hikes in the mountains and strange noises from his garage. Investigations into those allegations were dropped for lack of specific offenses. While secretly monitoring the suspect's home, FBI agents noticed that Carver regularly went on long overnight hikes with a heavy backpack, returning only in the late morning. The subject demonstrates a high awareness of possible surveillance, regularly changes routes, and utilizes countermeasures. Agent Ray Martinez, who led the outdoor surveillance, reported in the intelligence brief. Photographs taken with a Canon night vision camera showed Carver returning at dawn on October 12th. Of particular interest to analysts was a backpack that looked full when leaving and nearly empty when returning. The subject may be using remote locations to store belongings or dispose of evidence, FBI profiler Dr. Sarah Coleman suggested in her analysis. Data from a GPS tracker discreetly attached to Carver's 1,994-year-old Dodge Ram car showed regular trips to remote areas of the desert, often at night. Agents who checked one of these locations found only evidence of a recent campfire and several shell casings from .38 caliber cartridges, the same one used in the murder of David Cooper. District Court Judge Robert Hampton signed a search warrant for Carver's home on October 20th, after agents presented evidence linking him to the murder. The totality of the circumstantial evidence and the psychological profile create probable cause to conduct the search, the court order noted. The authorized search, conducted on October 21st, 2007, at 4 hours and 30 minutes in the morning, uncovered a shocking collection in the basement of Carver's home. More than 70 personal items belonging to various people, including Michael Peterson's driver's license and a Seiko wristwatch belonging to Thomas Mitchell, engraved on the back, "Love from Mom, Class of 1993. The room was set up like a museum of sorts, with lights and glass display cases, said Agent Tony Morales, who participated in the search. Each item had a label with the date and initials. Some had strange symbols added, the meaning of which we have yet to decipher. In addition to the personal belongings of the missing students, The collection contained driver's licenses, credit cards, jewelry, and photographs of at least 9 other people who went missing in the Grand Canyon area between 1989 and 2007. Forensics would later confirm that 4 of the men had been previously believed to have been accident victims. At the far end of the basement, the agents found a locked metal door leading to a small, windowless room. What we discovered was beyond the scope of normal collecting. These were trophies that he had neatly cataloged with dates and places of acquisition, FBI Special Agent Alan Turner wrote in his report. In that room was a Dell computer with a database containing detailed information on more than 30 hikers, including their itineraries, habits, and dates in the park. A particularly disturbing find was a collection of 12 Canon photo albums containing photographs of people in the park taken with a hidden camera. Many of the photos captured Michael, David, and Thomas at various locations in the Grand Canyon, from the time of their arrival to their last known location at Lipan Point Lookout. Forensic document analyst Lisa Chang, who analyzed the recovered records, noted, "Carver kept a detailed diary of his hunt using specific language and terminology indicative of a personal mythology he had developed. He called himself the Guardian of the Canyon and believed he was freeing the souls of his victims." Among the documents found, of particular interest to the investigation, was a map of the national park with red dots marking locations where the bodies of other victims could presumably have been located. "It was like a treasure map of a twisted mind," Agent Turner later commented in an interview for the Discovery Channel documentary Ghosts of the Canyon. Forensic psychologist Dr. Michael Levine, after analyzing the materials found in the house, concluded, "We have before us a classic example of an organized serial killer with a territorial type of behavior. He viewed the Grand Canyon as his personal territory and visitors as trespassers. When agents searched the house, Carver was not there. He went on another night, expedition. The task force decided not to detain him immediately, but to set up constant surveillance to see if he would lead them to other possible burial sites. It was a risky but necessary step," Operation Manager James Burke later explained. "We already knew he was responsible for the murder of David Cooper, but we wanted to find the remains of the other victims and gather as much evidence as possible. Thus began the final phase of the hunt for the man who had been hiding in plain sight for 14 years, leading the double life of park ranger by day and predator by night." October 30th, the year 2007. Dawn over the Arizona desert. 12 agents in tactical gear take up positions around a lonely house. The man who killed 3 friends 14 years ago returns home, unaware that his long game is over. But even caught, he will keep a major secret, where the bodies of the other 2 victims rest. Raymond Carver's arrest was made by an FBI special unit on October 30th, 2007, at 5 hours and 15 minutes in the morning, when the suspect returned from one of his nightly expeditions. He offered no resistance, just smiled and said, "You only found one, the rest will be mine forever," recalled Agent James Morrison, who led the operation. Video footage captured by Special Agent Ray Martinez's GoPro chest camera shows Carver calmly raising his hands and allowing himself to be handcuffed by Smith & Wesson, his face remaining serene, almost detached. The atmosphere of the arrest, as agents involved later noted, was imbued with a sense of the surreal. It was just starting to dawn. The sky had this particular reddish-orange hue that only happens in the desert, Agent Lauren Davis recounted. The temperature was about 42 degrees Fahrenheit, and as we exhaled, clouds of vapor formed. Carver was wearing REI hiking clothes, and there was fresh desert dust on his Timberland boots. A Coleman shovel, an empty North Face backpack, and a Nikon digital camera with photos of the Grand Canyon at night were found in the trunk of the Dodge Ram car in which Carver returned from the expedition. One of the photographs, dated 5 hours and 12 minutes that morning, captured a panorama of the canyon from a point inaccessible to ordinary hikers, the inspection report noted. Carver's first interrogation, conducted at FBI headquarters in Phoenix, lasted 7 hours and 32 minutes, but was inconclusive. The suspect answered questions about his work at the park, his hobbies, and the weather, but adamantly refused to discuss the disappearances or the evidence found in his home, Special Agent Patrick Donahue wrote in the report. FBI psychologist, Dr. Emily Reynolds, who observed the interrogation, noted, "Carver exhibited classic signs of psychopathy, a complete lack of empathy while maintaining high cognitive functioning and social skills." Carver's trial began on May 12, 2008, and lasted 7 weeks, during which time evidence was presented of his involvement in the disappearance of not only 3 friends, but 9 other hikers between 1989 and 2007. The federal courthouse in Phoenix, built in the year 2001 by architect Richard Meyer, with its bright, spacious halls, contrasted with the gloomy nature of the case at hand. Every morning of the trial, relatives of the victims, members of the media, and the merely curious gathered outside the courthouse. The atmosphere was electrifying, recalled CNN reporter Michelle Sanders. There was an unspoken division among the victims' relatives into 2 groups, those whose loved ones had been found and those who still didn't know where their loved ones rested. The defendant used his knowledge of remote areas of the park to track the victims, isolate them from groups, and abduct them, often under the guise of helping lost hikers, prosecutor Amanda Wright said in her closing arguments. The sound of her voice, clear and steady, reverberated off the marble walls of the packed courtroom. According to the trial transcript, when the prosecutor showed the jury photos of the cave where David Cooper was found, there was such silence in the room that the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. The prosecution's key witness was Janet Wilkins, who detailed oddities in Carver's behavior during his time at the park. He would always come back from patrols with some little things, key chains, sunglasses, sometimes photos. Said he found them on the trails, she testified, nervously fumbling through the beads of her Tiffany necklace. Behavioral analysis expert, Dr. John Marlowe gave the court a psychological profile of Carver. "We have a classic case of a territorial predator who sees his domain as sacred. Any intrusion is considered a desecration and requires ritual purification through the removal of the trespassers." Defense attorney Richard Townsend tried to build a defense line on the lack of direct evidence. "Other than the remains of one alleged victim and a collection of personal items that my client may have acquired legally, the prosecution has nothing." The argument sparked outrage in the courtroom, and Judge Elizabeth Clark was forced to admonish those present. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours and 42 minutes before reaching a unanimous verdict of guilty on all 12 counts of first-degree murder. When the verdict was announced, Carver sat motionless, his face expressing no emotion. His only reaction was a barely perceptible nod, as if to confirm that he had always known this outcome. Despite extensive searches at the locations Carver had indicated, the remains of Michael Peterson and Thomas Mitchell, as well as several other victims, were never found. which is perhaps the most distressing aspect for the families of the missing geologists and speleologists involved in the search, noted the incredible complexity of the landscape. The Grand Canyon contains thousands of unexplored caves, crevices, and natural mines. Some are inaccessible even to professional explorers, explained Dr. Alan Hammond of the U.S. Geological Survey in his report. At least we know what happened to my brother, but every night I think about Michael and Thomas, where they are, and if anyone will ever find them, said Sarah Cooper, David's sister, at a press conference after the sentencing. Video of the press conference shows Elizabeth Peterson, Michael's mother, sitting nearby, tightly clutching a mahogany-framed photograph of her son. Raymond Carver was sentenced to 12 life terms without parole and refused to cooperate with the investigation into the whereabouts of the remaining bodies. During his sentencing hearing on July 1, 2008, he uttered a single phrase: "The canyon keeps its dead better than the living keep their secrets." Carver is currently serving his sentence at ADX Florence Maximum Security Prison in Colorado, the same prison that houses America's most dangerous criminals. According to prison records, he spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, refusing to participate in rehabilitation programs or socialize with other inmates. The stretch of desert around Lipan Point, once a popular tourist destination, now often remains deserted even in high season, as if the land itself remembers the tragedy that played out in its expanse. Ranger Thomas Brooks, who has worked in the park since 2010, notes, "There are places people just don't want to go. Even if they don't know the history, they sense something unsettling in the air." Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, June 18th, the families of Michael, Thomas, and David gather at Lipan Point Lookout for a small memorial ceremony. "We bring 3 bottles of Coca-Cola that the boys bought at the gas station that day and leave them on the railing of the observation deck," says Robert Cooper, David's father. "It's our way of saying we're still waiting for them." The story of the 3 friends reminds us that even the most beautiful places can hide terrible secrets, and that evil often wears the mask of the ordinary, journalist Karen Davidson wrote in her book Missing in the Canyon, published in 2010. The book became a New York Times bestseller and brought attention to the issue of safety in national parks. In 2012, as a result of a review of security procedures, the National Park Service installed additional security cameras, increased the frequency of patrols on remote routes, and implemented a GPS beacon system available at park entrances. But for relatives of the victims, these measures are only faint consolation. "The system has changed, but our pain remains the same," says Margaret Mitchell, Thomas's mother. "We just want to know where our boy is so we can finally bury him and begin the healing process." And the Grand Canyon, majestic and indifferent to human tragedy, continues to hold its secrets, including the final resting places of Michael Peterson and Thomas Mitchell.